Did you figure out how long it'd been since you'd pulled your drone out?
That particular one, year and a half,
Hmm.
almost 2 years. Yeah, actually, no, it was over 2 years. That's pitiful. Like I said, I've flown that many four or more times accumulated than the other two all put together.
So Jeff, you're actually programming like new software into the drones?
No, 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 no. Just updating the firmware and the software, and because they're constantly DJI is always constantly sending updates and mappings and all that good stuff. So
But he is going
That's
to
cool.
install a little rocket launcher.
yeah, a little flamethrower.
Does it know to go from the couch to the fridge and back to the couch at least?
I don't think you can program it for such a short distance inside, but you can set up paths for it for sure. Routine.
It's when you put the fridge
Yeah,
outside.
Yeah.
yeah, I could do that.
Where does the
Yep.
fridge need to be for the drone to get what I need from it?
yeah, I'll have to. I've never used any of the mapping features. I should do that. I buy that shit, then it just sits in my. I'll take it out once or twice, and then a new one comes out, and I'm like, oh, I think I want that one too. I'm like, I haven't even flown the one that I have, but I still buy the
That's the real reason they're trying to ban DJI. They come out with new stuff so often that
drone. No,
it's just tired of trying to keep up with it.
it's impossible. I got 3 drones sitting in my basement. Of course, you probably got more than that.
I've only got two now, and they're both. Well, one of them finally got a. They came out with the Avata 2 recently.
I know. You didn't get that, did you?
No, no, I
No,
don't.
I was gonna say.
I checked it out. Uh, I can't justify it.
Yeah, looks nice though.
I,
Yeah.
I haven't quite gotten into the drone thing yet, except for the cheap ones for the kids. And that's where I could see them. When I was a teenager, it was like nitro powered RC
Mm-hmm.
cars.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I had a bunch of those and broke a bunch of them. And I was always working on them because they always break. I wonder if it will be drones for my kids.
Hmm.
Probably. At least maybe the racing. Yeah, I had 2 RC10s.
Oh, 5 seconds, guys.
They were the best ones back in the day.
All right. Welcome to Drone Refresh Friday.
Yes, drones and RC cars.
I don't know enough. It'll be pretty boring. I wouldn't mind getting back in RC cars. That is fun.
I saw like in our neighborhood a dad about my age and his son. He like broke them out, and it was like a blast from the past. And he had this huge grin. He's like, "I know, right? I know. It's back, and he's into it."
It's great.
Yeah.
what was
It's
what
like when
was
my daughter picked up a lacrosse stick. I'm like, yes.
Yep. I lent our one of our neighbors. His son is just getting into lacrosse, and I like took the Excalibur off the rack and let him borrow it, and he was like looking at it like as an antique
Yeah,
because it is,
it
I
is.
guess. But yeah,
Yeah, I had an Excalibur. That and I had 2 turbos. I don't know. I went through a lot of sticks.
yeah. For me, I still have a Haro, like a Haro shaft, and with like whatever STX had at the time for a head.
Hmm.
Um, but everyone kind of made fun of the Haro, and so I hung it up on the wall.
Yeah, some of the new sticks that got out now, man, they're nice. I actually went ahead and purchased one because my old turbo is pretty freaking old, and the new sticks are nice. Of course, they've really gone away from the traditional uh, pockets and really adapted heavy into the mesh pockets or some type of hybrid.
Yeah, I don't even know what's going on with them these days. I mean, I was back in like back rack days, bucket helmets. And then the
Oh, I
Cascades
know.
came
Same here.
out.
Yep.
That was a
Yep.
big deal. Yeah.
Cascades
The
came out
C2.
after I graduated high school, but we still would play a lot of pickup games in the area. So I went and got myself a Cascade helmet. I'm not wearing a big ass bucket on my head if I don't have to.
I don't know how that didn't cause like serious neck injuries.
It probably did. We're
Right.
all feeling it now.
Yeah.
Things weighed like 50 pounds.
Yeah.
It's the reason we're in the car business and not rocket scientists.
Right.
Yeah, basically.
Right.
Did you play all during high school?
I was off and on. I mean, I was just a kid in Virginia, so I played
Yeah,
lacrosse,
you almost
right?
had to. Yeah.
Yeah, and my brother was good, my sister was good. I was slow, small, and blind in one eye. So
Oh wow.
I knew what was happening on the field. So like I was a guy who would like play X and like dump in a play, but
Mhm.
I was only okay. I was like a second string guy, sometimes third, um, but I was good at golf. So I kind of
Yeah.
bounced between golf and skiing.
Nice.
Or yeah,
Very nice. A lot of the same hobbies. I've never been skiing, but plenty of time on the snowboard.
yeah. Alex up in Vermont is probably you probably get out there every
Oh
once in a
yeah.
while, or did
He
at
was
least.
heavy into it for a while.
Yeah, it hasn't been the past few years.
Yeah, ski the east, whatever you got, you
That's
know.
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, thinking, climate seems to be comes in different waves. So, uh, my wife's from here, so she's always talking about how we're due for 5 years of this next and 5 years of that next, and we just went through the like couple of years of crazy cold where saw -17 a few times, and then there was one year we had like 3 weeks below zero. That was nice. All the doors in the house are freezing over on the inside, and there
Yeah, you
was
get the frost.
Too cold.
Yeah.
yeah, and then a couple of years where good dumps of snow, and now we've just been sort of dry but really rainy. And then this winter was wild. It was the warmest winter I've ever seen here. So
We had a relatively mild winter in Colorado. Last year was insane. The tons of snow. We were getting all of the storms that were coming to California and Utah were like the last stop on those. Um, so last year was a good year, but I have young kids right now. So
yeah.
I'm like watching, I'm like down in the valley at the Bunny Hill, like watching everybody doing their thing up there. But it's good. I'm putting in time now because my son's really into skiing, and give it 10 years and we'll be ripping out there together. It'll be worth it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, JD, we definitely have a giant. I want to call him a geek. I'm lacking on other words at the moment, and that's my fault. But Drew Amin is here, and he is
Uh-oh.
super sharp, and loves some details. So I know you've got a lot brewing.
Yeah. And I'll give Drew the precursor. I'm still just a dumb sales guy. So I know some acronyms. I don't know where we put them together all the time, but just watching automotive in the last couple of years and some motions that are happening, what's available in the marketplace, who kind of lives where, is something I've been paying more attention to, and some gaps just in the retail journey that I think I can help fill. So, Drew, don't test me too much, but glad you're here.
Oh, that's kind of impossible request of Drew.
Yeah.
But where do you want to start, JD? Just do you want to take a
Well,
step back? Last time you were on, we were sort of showing the world that Vonage isn't your grandmother's phone system anymore.
mhm, yeah.
Maybe take a
And
minute to address that for a second.
Right. And I love that tagline you gave me because I actually tried to use it and marketing shot me down. Um, I was using it fairly often afterwards because no, we're not your grandma's boy. Sure, we can still help her out, I'm sure, but uh, for those that didn't tune into the last session, yeah, I work on the CPaaS side of the business, which stands for Communications Platform as a Service. And essentially, what it is access to use communications API or individual channels that you would build into your own application and be able to reference. So if you are a software platform or even a dealer, it just says, I want an SMS to be sent at this given time automatically and a computer does it for me, that's what you would use a communications API to do. And I think last time we talked a little bit about us versus Twilio. Um,
By the
there's
way,
a story
we're
there.
still welcome to shit all over Twilio.
We can talk a little bit more about just even your story. I mean, whatever you're willing to share as far as you being a customer of both and kind of how you came to get to know me a little bit better. Um, yeah, I think that's your story is a one that we come across fairly often, and it's only a starting point. Um,
Share it.
what would you share?
Well, even since you were last on, the stories developed further. Um, so, uh, to make the a long story short, let's just say that Twilio made a decision to axe a lot of their employees, and they shifted their support team around. And it got to a point where you couldn't have the same phone call with the same or the same issue with the same person. So, and then it was very rare that any one person could actually tackle one issue. Um, so it's this continued nightmare, really, of like, how do I get this one little thing taken care of? And I've got to go through all these different people over this time. And I had engineers and support people who were just nonstop uh, trying to get things done through Twilio people, and it was impossible. The level of service just became non-existent, and even some of the big companies we work with. So, little known thing about Frickin' Tech is we do white label products for some of the insurance carriers, and so sending offers out on behalf of insurance companies to entice customers to buy insurance, and even they, with their large Fortune 100 size, one of them in particular I'm thinking of, I will keep them nameless, but there might be some yellow that has to do with them, their logo. But they even they are struggling to get things done, and the amount of money they spend over there and their size, like it's shocking to me. So
Right.
my guess is Twilio was a little more liberal with what they allowed to go through the texting pipes, and the uh, cell phone carriers are quite guarded over their what you can text from a marketing standpoint, and there were probably a lot of there might have been a bit of pushback from the carriers at some point, and Twilio had to jump through some hoops they weren't ready to jump through. It's a theory.
Right. I mean, it was a lot of moving targets as far as SMS regulation the last couple of years, and yeah, they put themselves in a position that was sort of forced upon them sometimes by activists or investors, things like that. They were in a tough position to be able to keep that one-to-one level of support with account management in a consistent manner. And I'll just speak from my experience at Vonage. I joined them 3 years ago. I still have a lot of the same accounts I had when I was fresh. And we made a strong focus in hiring right people that could stick with changing tides, and then we were all rewarded as a result. There's a lot of internal promotions. A lot. I just got lucky with a company that has strong leadership and a good moral compass as far as sticking with one step in front of the other. And from that, the reps themselves gained a lot of education to be able to guide customers through a changing regulatory environment. So when you look at some of the shortcuts that were taken in the past, if they weren't addressed, they're just problems that grew larger. And I think that in general, in like my corner of the world, you have direct senders, and you have independent software vendors that service a bunch of different businesses. And it took too long for those that help guide through communication channels to recognize the difference between the two and how they need to be set up. And we put a focus on fixing those problems. And sometimes it can be thankless, but in the long run pays off. And in your case, Alex, that's kind of what happened with us. You had dealers that you needed to keep live. You needed to be able to provision numbers for each of them quickly. And you needed guidance in how to do it the right way the first time. And I think our ability to help you do that was a key piece. But that really is just the starting point, right? Like SMS in the US it can be done by a lot of people. And if you look at how it's been in the past, it's just one-way notifications, things like that. When you can get those foundational pieces like keeping the channel live in general done, then you get into the fun stuff. And that's a lot of what I've been working on and trying to help in the automotive industry. And it's not just SMS. It's okay. Data has been the ultimate currency in automotive for the last few years. It's always been, but actually taking steps to centralize and compile data and use it, and maybe make it more open in a lot of cases, like the walled gardens, so to speak, are coming down. People are starting to reap the benefits of those efforts. But I'm trying to find myself in the place where, okay, you have data more relatively available in multiple places. At some point, you're going to need to communicate the insight that data gave you. And how are we doing that right now? Is it more of a one-way alert or notification? Is it, or is it more conversational in nature? What channels are we using when? Like the whole right message at the right time thing is handled, but is it on the right channel? And so that's a lot of where I've placed myself in. And maybe that additional context of what's happening in automotive, along with the extra white glove service I give in these channels, is what's gotten me a little bit momentum in automotive lately.
So when you say keeping the line open, can you expand on what that means?
Well, if you are a software company that has 1,000 customers, let's say, and you're running all those 1,000 customers on one phone number or one campaign, we ran into the whole 10 DLC framework before. I won't go too deep into that. But if you have it set up more as like a direct brand, but you're not really a direct brand, you are subject to blocks. And it's just the way. You're technically out of compliance, and no one really wants like compliance to be the fear factor, but it's an unfortunate reality of how things are these days. So keeping the line open is your CPaaS rep helping you not get blocked. Now, if you're getting blocked because of content or whatever, like that's not something that we can necessarily help you with. But making sure that you're setting up framework correctly. One number, one business, right? A dealership is a business. So they get a number, not the software platform that is powering that one number for multiple businesses.
Which was the fastest way to get something stood up in the past, was to
Yeah.
assign one phone number to one, call it technology solution, instead of the dealerships in this case, which is
Mm-hmm.
what Twilio was pushing to
Mm.
lessen costs and get things moving faster, because it's getting approval and getting through all the steps is a bear.
It really is for everyone involved, me included. Like it's like, okay, like when you're evaluating a project, it's like, okay, are you in this with me? Like, we're gonna have to go do this one prerequisite, and there's gonna be a learning curve, and you might not like me for just a little bit, but then you'll love me when I get it on the other side. And then we could then, like, we have the number live. And what are we gonna do with it now? That's where the fun begins. Um, and it's a part of working with automotive SaaS platforms that is that gives me fulfillment, and hopefully that context is what allows me to understand what they're really trying to do, where the gaps are, and how we fill
Hmm. Have you been able to streamline that at all?
like the registration process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the unfortunate part is that it's still very manual, right? Like,
Okay.
you'll find providers like me that are like, automate your submission, or automate the, for this number type or that number type, and automation on the submission's great, but you have to recognize that no matter what, eventually a person needs to manually review that. And a bad if you submit something automatically with having no context, it's going to take longer than working with me on the front end.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So, but yes, I have streamlined the ability to, you know, take a software vendor, educate them on what it needs to be, do a couple submissions, make sure thumbs up, and then we scale it up. And we throw a bunch of batches in, and we have confidence that it's going to be what it needs to be. And we can flip them back faster than you would expect.
So, Drew's first question. So, who's ultimately responsible for the blocks when they occur?
So I'm reading a vendor ABC. They're all texting using different numbers because, yeah, they added numbers. So I'll address that first piece, like duality and communication, right? Like, you have one dealer using multiple software platforms communicating to one customer with a bunch of different numbers. And I tried to think about, I was like, how do I fix this, right? And the short answer was, the user doesn't really care at the end of the day, like, as long as the message is relevant at that given time and welcome. There might be a centralized piece, like with their sales rep, to be able to ask their sales rep questions and things like that. But do all pieces of the dealership need to be consolidated to that one number? Though that would be nice. That isn't the current reality. I'll just say that. Like, I don't have to give an opinion on what it should be or could be, but that's the current reality, that you're going to have a bunch of different numbers doing different things for the same business from different software providers. My answer is that each individual number, that who owns that, the software company, is responsible for the direct content that happens on that number. It falls on that software vendor.
And do you know of any dealers who do this directly?
Well, when I look at in DealerRefresh, you look at like a Todd or a Craig, who they have their own Twilio accounts, and they've programmed their APIs in themselves, and they're getting the numbers. They have a lot more control, and they probably can centralize a lot of different functions into that one phone number. But Craig and Todd are responsible for those numbers. So yes, there are dealers, but I don't think there's a lot.
Yeah, and both of those guys are doing their own coding, building
Wizards.
building actual software. Yeah.
Yeah. And is that realistic for all dealerships across the United States? Probably not. Unless, I don't know, like we've talked about new roles that pop up in dealerships because of AI or whatever that might be. I mean, Jeff, would you have a software developer at your Mercedes store?
No, not at a single point, but maybe under the group, there's 5 or 6 dealerships. I mean, wouldn't be totally out of the question.
Yeah. You do run into this builder buy question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter what, that's always going to be the question. And then even when you look at the software companies, there's a builder buy question. When I'm talking to software companies, it's builder buy, right? Like if I was talking to Alex, would ask about something completely new, it would be, well, do you want to build it with me, or could you just integrate with another platform and get that done?
Mm-hmm.
And there's pros and cons to both routes. So it's always going to be a conversation. I think
I'll
that
give you a real world. So we generate leads for dealers, and some dealers aren't as good as others at responding to those leads. Imagine that. And so we've brought BDCs in to actually call these customers and handle the leads on behalf of the dealers and then send appointments back to the dealership. Um, and we had a big question here because we have expertise on staff at Frickin' Tech who can run a call center. Uh, Many of us have done it before. And so we looked at, do we hire and build it out in house? And we ultimately decided no. We didn't want to take that headache on. We wanted to stay a software company. So
Mhm. Yeah. And those are a lot of the decisions that you're running into. It's like, and kind of going back to, for me, at first, a software platform, they live in some part of the retail journey, right? And they either decide they're the master of one, or, they can jack of all trades. And you're trying to figure out as a CPAS rep, okay, where does your journey begin and end? And what part of it do you own? And where do you pass the torch? And maybe you try to push the boundary of that torch a little bit. And unless we're just having like a commoditized conversation about me replacing your, SMS spend with Twilio, like we can always do that. But when things get interesting is when it's like, okay, you own the inbound call flow, right? Like you have the intelligence, the call tracking of it, and things like that. But what happens after that? After that inbound call flow, you pass the torch to the phone system or the CRM or whatever that might be, and then you lose visibility of it. Do you want to own that next step, or do you want to continue to be the obvious solution for this one piece of the journey? And that answer is different for everybody, and there's no real wrong answer there. But what I do find is when you have a platform trying to move into that next step, the trend in automotive is, well, we just integrate, right? And we just do data transfers, and we pick up a ton of data from that first call, that inbound call. We can pass that on. That's our value. And if there's any communication that needs to happen afterwards, like they got to handle. But do they? Are they doing it the way you want them to? Is that integration working out? Is it justified? Do you want to own it? And could you?
so you're talking about a scenario where maybe you've got a call rail or a call review or some sort of inbound call monitoring tool that's recording all the inbound phone calls into the dealership, and dealers have got that pipe well covered, but anything going out isn't recorded, or is that
If it is, it may live somewhere else, right? And the question will be, where is it being centralized? How consistent is the intelligence that you're gathering from that call recording. I mean, if you're not like Craig, where you can host your own recording somewhere, you're depending on the software platform to do it. And that software platform uh, may be trying to figure out how they do it, right? And it's going to take some ownership in, you know, do they integrate with that phone system? How are they going to integrate with that phone system? How well does that phone system play with maybe an API platform that can be very elastic in the way that it records those phone calls, or not just gives you pre-call and post-call data, but actually has you join the media session? Like, what's your level of access to that outbound call if you wanted to be a part of it? That follow up in general? Or, are we even going to augment that journey to where you have the inbound call set and is really good if someone picks up the phone? But if they don't pick up the phone, then what? What is the next step that's being actioned? Do they have a failover to SMS? Do they want to do call deflection to SMS if no one's picking up at the service lane? Who's going to own that deflection? It doesn't have to be the contact center. It doesn't have to be the phone system. It can be whoever's willing to take it on.
Yeah. I see where you're thinking it going. I know you can't jump into too much detail on that particular topic, but that's like I don't know many dealers that are really thinking about their outbound call quality. I mean, there are CRMs that have a click to call feature, but getting salespeople to use it is
It
that's a
goes down
chore
a
in
lot.
itself. Yeah, and then God forbid you ask a service writer to do it. Yeah,
So
if it
that's
was
typically how it
seamlessly
goes.
done,
Yeah. I guess that's where my questions are, is like, what's the frontline reality of it, right? And what is the process, and where, even if something is built, you can't build these products in a vacuum, right? And that's sort of what I look to DealerRefresh too. Like, if a click to call exists in a CRM right now, it's like, let's say we're living in the central, it's either the phone system that has a soft phone or whatever, or the CRM that's a click to call. Like, what is the most realistic process? Is it do nothing and it happens anyway? Like, it has to be. And do we want all the calls recorded? Like, what if I'm making a dentist appointment? I probably use my personal cell, not the company phone number, right?
Should.
Yeah.
yep.
Okay, so Drew, you're using your cell phone. That's a
Yeah.
good point. So Jeff, like, in a dealer setting, even when you do have, like, so you have like a go-to or a total CX or something along the lines. I mean, when are those getting used versus the cell phone? Or are you pretty strict about, like, don't use your cell phone? Or if you're using your cell phone, use this platform. And what is the platform?
Um, Sort of lucky, I guess, with old school. No one ever wants to use their personal phones for anything, including installing apps. Uh, I forget what phone service we use, and you got to install an app, and of course that app has some tracking on it. So we've got some. They're like, no, I'm not putting that shit on my phone.
Yeah.
But we do have click to call integrated into the CRM. That comes back to inspecting what you expect, running reports, looking at making sure your team knows that you're looking at those things. Um, it definitely makes it easier for them to use a click to call feature. Uh, but if no one's going to police it or at least review it, tie it to some actions, then what good is it?
Yeah.
And here's like the transcription. services are really good now, and
Mm-hmm.
there's AI language models that can search within transcripts. And apologies, I think there's some fighter jets going
Jet.
over and getting picked up at all. But the if every outbound call was recorded, and let's take the cell phone portion out for a minute. Um, but if every outbound call was recorded and you knew that like some sort of AI or something was going to pick up when numbers were discussed. So, trade figures talked about, a payments quoted, you know, anything along those lines, and that call gets bubbled up. So it's like, hey, manager, this is something you should, take a look at. Because like I look at AI transcripts right now. We've got a little thing we're doing with a third party at the moment and testing it out. But the transcripts are so damn rich. It's like you can see exactly what the customer is talking about. You can see how the AI is responding, and sometimes the customer is talking about a number on their trade, and the AI is trying to schedule an appointment to come in and get a real trade appraisal on it. But it's like at that point, you'd want a human to take over and jump in there
Mm-hmm.
and give the
Mhm.
customer some sort of range or something, just to be like, hey, this is this is what we can do now. Let's schedule the time so we can actually put the real number on here. But
So you're thinking almost like an agent assist use case, and that's like if we have the outbound call is being recorded, but it's a human on the line, and there's AI listening in on it, transcribing it, analyzing it, and then spitting back out insight instead
mhm.
of passing the baton to the AI to have the conversation, which we won't like. That's a whole nother conversation. We still have the human in the loop, and the AI is giving tips, coaching to or at least information. Like if I'm a good sales rep, maybe I don't need the information, but the AI can tell me what the range of that car, and I handle the rest.
Oh, maybe. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking more, and to Drew's point, he just threw a comment up about before the all the AI stuff. All I had to do was listen to 10 recorded calls, and I could figure out where my problem was on the phone. And that's more of what I'm talking about. It's more like here's a phone call that Billy made, and they got into some numbers, and like the AI is smart enough to realize when a number is a phone number that's being shared and another number is a price of some sort that's being shared, and it can bubble that up. And what'll happen a lot of the time with salespeople is they'll tell a customer a number that is completely fictitious or way off because usually they don't know. And the sales manager is going to want to come in and maybe correct it or uh, give them a talk track on how to get around giving somebody a bogus number on something.
Yeah.
So,
So more of a coaching use case, like after the call.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, all of the above is capable. When it's really a question of who, like, what software are we giving the power of the access to that call or the ownership of that call, and that's another thing I'm finding we're navigating, right? Because it turns into partnerships and people not wanting to step on toes and things like that. But the reality is the responsibility of the retail journey is everyone, right? So, and you can't not a one size fits all can't work. Like you have end to end software platforms that potentially can do all this, right? All consolidated into one platform. You have strong partnerships that integrate well and make this happen. You have umbrella groups that have 50 different products underneath them. But within those pieces, like the one thing that is constant is that an inbound call to an outbound call is a shift in the journey. I don't care if it's one platform that handles all of it, if it's, partner integration or whatever, that is a shift in who's going to own the shift and what does the shift look like. And on the other side, whether it's a product, a company, a person, whatever. Where that ownership and control is key.
Well,
And what
speaking
you
of,
can do, go ahead. Yeah.
oh, well, there was a question from Drew. If you're going to stay on that same topic, I won't throw this up here yet, but if you're ready to answer another question about SMS opt outs and who owns those.
Let's see.
So if
Before
somebody
all the
says
AI,
stop, yeah, are they opting out of the vendor or the dealer?
Mm.
they're opting out of the phone number.
The campaign,
Mm.
right?
Right. So technically the vendor, but now we're getting into sort of a dangerous area because as a consumer, if I'm opting out of that number, I may think I'm opting out of the dealer.
Yeah,
And
they
if
don't
I
know.
get a message, yeah, they don't know that. And if I really did just want your Mercedes dealership in Hagerstown to stop texting me, how is the Mercedes dealership in Hagerstown going to know from this one number that all these other numbers need to stop? That's essentially what the question is, right?
Well, I mean, we
Yeah.
deal with that
I
with
think
emails,
Drew's asking
you
who's
know?
responsible.
Who's responsible, like legally?
Yep, legally, it's you're opting out of the campaign.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You could even get a text from that number again. You're just not.
So, so if we would go into the like probably how that legal conversation would go is that the software vendor that essentially owns that number, they set up stop support. So when that user said stop, that software vendor stopped. And that they may need some kind of disclaimer that doesn't, that their responsibility ends there. And if you have a problem as a dealership with other software vendors, I can't control that. It is not an ideal situation, but that's probably how the software vendor would respond.
In like I opt. So right now, the political campaigning texts are
That's what I
annoying.
was going to
Yeah,
bring up.
and
Because, the first time you opt in, there's definitely fine text there that says, hey, we can share your information with, whoever we want to, basically. So you hit stop, but you're going to get 10 more that day.
Yeah, I feel
Because
it's
and they're
worse.
all, I mean, they're not, they sort of, I guess they'll frame them to make them look like they're coming from either different campaigns, different people, whatever. But you're just, it's, I don't know, it becomes overwhelming at sometimes.
Well, the reality with like the political messaging thing is so you are not supposed to, as a software vendor or someone who holds PII,
Mm-hmm.
you have to make it very clear to mobile carriers that you will not sell or share that data, that opt-in data. And without me making like strong accusations, I think that that's probably a little loose in the political world.
I'm sure it is.
I think that that's the problem is that,
It's
I get
gotta
a,
be.
like, so I get a text message from whatever congressman, right? I never heard of, opt out. 5 minutes later, it's a different one.
Another one.
I think that's a different campaign office. So it
Mhm.
truly is a different business. But in your case of having a dealership with a complex retail journey and a lot of software platforms that support it with different phone numbers, you are one business and it makes it tough because
Mhm.
that one part of the journey got opted out and you still are one business that's reaching out. And you may be very well doing it in earnest. You just don't know. It's
Yeah.
not a case of you sharing your data. Well, I guess you are sharing your data among your dealership, but you should have the right to do that within your own business. So yeah, it's a bit of that is a gray area for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one that right now in its current state may put the dealership at undue risk. It makes it tough for the dealer unless we
I
can
agree.
consolidate all of those communications into one phone number.
This is not a new issue for the dealers. The
No.
mailers and emails,
Emails.
even before texting was utilized at the level it's used now. It's always been that way. However,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I will say this: some DMSs are pretty good at delivering opt-out markers on customer data.
Hmm.
So if you do have a vendor that's texting on your behalf, you should ask them if they're paying attention to that or not. And of course, your team needs to make sure that they're opting people out in the DMS. But
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me wonder, like, me as like a tech sales rep, you use something like Outreach or Sales Loft or whatever, and you see a contact and there's like an opt out piece. And when you dial out, it could be from whatever phone number, right? So they're not, in that case, they're not really you're opting out the contact, not the number.
Yeah.
But it's the responsibility falls on the calling party to do that.
well, I do think for the dealership, the DMS is probably the best source of truth. It's the most consistent. It's the vendor you're probably not changing the most often, um,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and they will provide that information. And to your point, JD, that's a contact opt out. That's not a phone number opt out. So you
Mm-hmm.
are nailing their email address, their physical address, and all phone numbers that would be in the system with them. So
Right. But I like to think if we can get the channel and the messaging and the experience right, you'll have less of those opt outs.
yeah,
And then what can we do? And I'm having a lot of fun with, you know, if we just keep dealers out of hot water, and so they know what they can and can't do with the things they can do, what are the possibilities? And it's a very fun place for me to be in right now. And I'm learning a lot. I'm learning more now than I did as a rep that was visiting dealers. Like I learned other things, but now I'm starting to understand a lot of the technology that dealers are creating on their own to even fix a lot of these problems. And I haven't seen other industries that are as innovative um, in doing it, or motivated at least in doing it. So
Hmm.
you wrote me back in.
yeah. Well, once you
Yeah,
get in the car business, you can't get out.
yeah, that might be my fault. I think I found myself looking, being like, "Hey, what are you guys doing these days?" And it's cool. It's cool. I mean, and you start looking at like where SMS and voice is one thing, and then video has its place. If you put it in the right place with the in where AI should and shouldn't live, what it can and can't realistically do. Um, those are all fun questions to answer.
Yeah, and you guys, so Vonage, you all do phones, SMS, and you have an AI component, right?
We do. Yeah, so AI Studio is my favorite of any of the, like, we have a fully baked platform that enterprises could buy. Um, but AI Studio lives more on the build route. But essentially, what AI Studio is a conversation builder. So if you want, if we're leveraging our SMS API or voice or video or whatever, how do you want that journey to initiate those channels? And I won't go so far as to say it's like this orchestration tool that can do all these great things. Like I really want to its main purpose is to be able to build and develop with our APIs in a fraction of the time and drag and drop them into a place to do a certain thing at a given time the way you want it to. So it's been very strong for making an IVR, like phone tree, when you call in. It's been great to make those smarter. It's really been strong with appointment setting, call deflection in general. Uh, I really like a use case where you call into a call center, call some kind of agent, and that phone call isn't necessarily the best channel to be used. And so you deflect to, say, a messaging channel. And then from that messaging channel, you're going to want to bring it up to a phone call, another phone call later, or a video call later, based on how that went. You want an appointment to be set, things like that. The creativity I found with AI Studio usually falls on the software platforms I'm looking to, and that's where it's fun for me because they're better at using it than me, and they're more creative.
You know what my favorite use case is for it?
What?
It's when the FU response comes back.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
What is your
Oh, there's
response going to be? Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Because you can't run a texting campaign without somebody throwing a vulgarity back at you. There's
Right.
also the I'm driving my Nissan right now. I can't speak. So those are
Oh,
yes,
there's a lot of responses
Oh,
you
they're
could
they
throw there.
automate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're automated.
yes, but you need to put those somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's really good for filtering through the stuff that you know.
I I like to I like throwing weird responses at some of the demo apps that like our sales or solutions architects have built. And like one for NADA, we did like a scan a QR code and schedule an oil change type thing. And the QR code goes straight to an SMS thread, and then you're introduced to, like Axel, the bot or something. And but so the easy stuff like setting an oil change, based on just like my VIN, and maybe you could look up the last time an oil change was done, and what other recommended service there may be in addition to that oil change, and then scheduling that oil change. That, if you're a normal human, is a pretty easy flow to go through. But then I started throwing curveballs like, man, I'm kind of hungry. You got snacks in the waiting area? And like I had to answer that. I was like, what you got for snacks? Like, like those
Well,
kinds
you
of
got to call
things.
an
And
API to get that one though.
right. And so it's funny to see where those conversations can go. And that enters a whole new world of working with large language models and the capability of the AI and things like that, and which have found at least our natural language understanding is good. But the key piece is leveraging AI Studio to be able to action that next step. And its ability to have the conversation is good. But what I really like it for is if you plan to build your own experience and use communications API to do it, this is a good way to weave those channels together. And at its most basic form, that's why I think where it's the most powerful.
Well, we got another question from the audience. Rick Buffkin. He was wondering if there's a specific hours you're allowed to send text messages.
So yeah, the quiet hours is really, it's kind of state by state. Florida is the most strict. I run into this with marketing automation platforms that are my customers. Think cart abandonment, things like that. They're very aware of the hours that they're sending. So I'd say 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And that's just a general rule I think you should try to stick to. It's only really enforced in some states, but it's a good guideline.
Yeah, you can break that rule when they're responding to you.
Okay.
Yep.
I didn't even realize there were quiet time. Makes sense. Just never even considered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that mostly applies to application to person messaging when you're having you're not, not a one-to-one conversation with the
Right.
human
Yeah.
direct.
I guess that's so people don't wake up to 100 text messages from automated systems every morning.
Right.
Oof, imagine that. It's already bad enough in the emails.
I was going to say it's already bad enough.
and
Yeah.
and I think almost everyone on DealerRefresh was an internet manager at some time, so we all have this compelling feeling to look and respond to every email as soon as we see it. So
Yeah.
painful in the morning.
Yeah. I need to learn to block out the emails, but I'm also learning to treat email differently than, say, SMS or a phone call.
Yeah.
Drew, do you have a best friend?
I think how many times have I texted Drew at 2 in the morning? Yes, we can. Yeah, I could set up the AI studio to program text to Drew.
Yeah.
We go.
I
Yeah,
say bombard him.
yeah.
Right. Test those quiet hours.
I think he's in a state where you can just go to town.
He asked for it.
Have him
That's
come from
funny.
an AI girlfriend.
All right. Well, JD, we're rolling down on the 2 o'clock minute here.
Yeah,
Anything
I
else you want to share
appreciate.
today?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit more about where Vonage seems to live these days and what we can offer to automotive. I mean, I think being in that intersection of where data becomes communication and how we're communicating is should be or probably already is much of the conversation this year. I've heard some
Mhm.
call it the year of activation, right? And how are we activating the data that we have? And even if we have access to messaging channels and voice calls and things like that, what are we actually doing in that channel? Are we reaching the full potential of that channel? And when that interaction ends, what's the next step? And how are we actioning that next step? Those are a lot of the places that I want to live, and I'm finding I have the ability to do. Uniquely with the phone systems and all of that, I have a phone system too. I'm not necessarily selling that phone system directly, but there's maybe a data asset in there that could come into play every
Mhm.
once in a while. And if it isn't, the same way I get data from that phone system applies to other phone systems too.
Hmm. So I know you're working on something, and I'm being real careful not to put you in a spot
Just
where.
reach, just yeah, just DM me on LinkedIn or or give me an email, jd.higginbotham@vonage.com. Would love to talk about it. I mean, it's that I do really try to behave well when we're building out things because we're building them out for software platforms that are you know trying to make it a product. So I'm still learning where the guardrails are on a lot of that stuff. And right now we just have ideas and architecture on how things could happen, but um, always looking for more people to feed the justification to build the crap out of something like that. So at the very least, I'm introducing myself that's willing to take ideas, pull people together, and build them.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's always good catching up with you guys. I'll see
Likewise,
you
No, I
on the
JD.
appreciate it.
forums. Yeah.
You got it.
All right.
Everyone have a
See ya.
good weekend.